A cute baby dragon was taken to the altar, but did something stunning when it saw a human girl. The ancient drums echoed across the volcanic plains of Dracoris as thousands of dragon-like beings gathered around the altar of flames. Smoke rose from the sacred pit where eternal fires had burned for over 10,000 years. Today marked another sacred bonding ceremony, where newborn dragons would receive their life purpose from the spirits of their ancestors. High Priestess Lyra spread her massive wings and stepped forward. Her golden scales caught the firelight as she raised her arms toward the crimson sky. The crowd fell silent. Even the youngest hatchlings stopped their playful chirping. This moment demanded absolute respect. Today we welcome 3 new souls into our ancient bond, Lyra announced. Her voice carried across the gathering without effort. May the flames reveal their destined paths. 3 small dragons sat in carved stone bowls near the altar. 2 of them had the traditional deep red scales that marked them as future warriors or fireworkers. But the 3rd dragon was different. Ember possessed unusual silver-blue scales that shimmered like starlight. Many in the crowd whispered about this strange coloring. Some called it a blessing. Others feared it meant trouble. Ember squirmed in his stone bowl. Unlike the other babies who stared respectfully at the sacred flames, he kept turning his head toward the crowd. His bright yellow eyes darted from face to face as if searching for something. The priestess noticed this behavior but continued with the ancient ritual. "Spirit flames, show us the way," Lyra chanted. She picked up the first baby dragon and held him above the fire. The flames turned brilliant orange and images appeared in the smoke. A mountain forge. Hammers striking metal. The crowd murmured approval. This one would become a master crafter. The 2nd dragon received the same treatment. Green flames revealed forest paths and healing herbs. Another good sign. This baby would serve as a medicine keeper. Now came Ember's turn. Lyra lifted the silver-blue dragon carefully. He felt lighter than the others, and his scales were surprisingly cool to touch. As she held him over the sacred fire, something unexpected happened. The flames flickered and changed color rapidly, cycling through silver, blue, white, and gold. No clear images formed in the smoke. "Strange," Lyra muttered. In all her years as High Priestess, she had never seen such confused flames. The spirits seemed unable to decide Ember's fate, but Ember wasn't looking at the fire at all. His head remained turned toward the forest beyond the ceremonial grounds. His small body trembled with excitement, and he made soft chirping sounds that none of the other dragons had ever produced. 3 days earlier, something had crashed in those very woods. The Parathi had investigated and found twisted metal and strange markings, but no survivors. They assumed it was space debris and ignored it. Now Ember seemed fascinated by that exact direction. Hidden among the tall trees, Dr. Rose Bennett crouched behind her makeshift shelter. Her research vessel had suffered critical engine failure during a routine survey mission. The crash landing had destroyed most of her equipment, leaving only basic survival gear and a damaged scanner. For 3 days she had remained hidden while observing the most remarkable alien civilization she had ever encountered. Rose was a xenobiologist, trained to study alien life forms. But the Parathi were beyond anything in the scientific databases. They combined advanced intelligence with dragon-like bodies, creating a society that mixed technology with what appeared to be magic. Their city was carved directly into the volcanic mountainside, with towers that spiraled up like frozen flames. She had been documenting their behavior patterns when the ceremonial drums began. Through her scanner's damaged view screen, she watched the gathering crowd. The ritual fascinated her. It seemed to be some kind of coming-of-age ceremony for their young. Rose adjusted her scanner to get a better view of the altar. The device sparked and hummed as its broken circuit struggled to function. She tried to shut it down, but the damage was too severe. A brief energy pulse shot out from the scanner before it died completely. The pulse was small and lasted only a fraction of a second. Rose barely noticed it. But on the altar, Ember's reaction was immediate and dramatic. His yellow eyes blazed with sudden intensity. He twisted in the priestess's grip and let out a piercing cry that silenced the entire gathering. "What troubles you, little one?" Lyra asked, trying to calm the agitated dragon. But Ember would not be soothed. He struggled harder, his small wings beating frantically. The crowd began to murmur nervously. Some of the elders stood up, sensing that something was wrong. Captain Stone, leader of the Parathi warriors, placed his hand on his weapon. His battle-scarred red scales marked him as a veteran of many conflicts. Ember suddenly broke free from Lyra's grip. His small wings carried him in a direct line toward the forest where Rose was hiding. The crowd gasped in shock. No dragon had ever abandoned the sacred bonding ceremony. "Stop him," Elder Dawn commanded. She was the oldest Parathi present. Her ancient scales faded to pale pink. "This is blasphemy." Captain Stone and a dozen warriors took flight immediately. Their powerful wings created wind gusts that scattered the ceremonial fires. But Ember was small and fast, darting between the trees before they could catch him. Rose heard the commotion and saw the small dragon flying straight toward her hiding spot. Panic filled her mind. If the aliens found her, they might consider her presence an invasion. But there was nowhere to run. Ember landed directly in front of Rose's shelter. For a moment, neither moved. The baby dragon tilted his head and studied her with curious eyes. Rose barely dared to breathe. Everything she knew about first contact protocols ran through her mind, but none of it covered this situation. Then Ember did something that shocked them both. He stepped forward and gently nuzzled against Rose's hand. A warm, tingling sensation spread through her fingers. It felt like touching electricity, but pleasant instead of painful. Ember began making a soft purring sound that seemed to match the rhythm of Rose's heartbeat. The sound of approaching wings grew louder. Captain Stone and his warriors would arrive within moments. Rose found herself staring into the eyes of an alien baby who had somehow chosen her over his own kind. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew her life had just changed forever. The first Parathi warrior crashed through the trees just as Ember curled up against Rose's chest, his silver-blue scales glowing softly in the dim forest light. Captain Stone landed hard, his claws digging deep grooves in the forest floor. Behind him, 11 more warriors descended through the canopy like falling meteors. Their red and orange scales gleamed with battle readiness and smoke curled from their nostrils. They had expected to find a kidnapper or some dangerous predator. Instead, they found something that defied all logic. A strange, pale creature sat perfectly still while Ember nested comfortably against its chest. The alien had soft, scaleless skin and odd fur growing only from the top of its head. Its eyes were smaller than Parathi eyes, but they held intelligence. Most shocking of all, it made no aggressive moves despite being surrounded by armed warriors. "Step away from the hatchling," Stone commanded. His voice carried the authority of someone who had led troops through countless battles. "Return what you have stolen." Rose understood none of his words, but his tone was clear enough. She raised her hands slowly, hoping the gesture would be recognized as peaceful. "I'm not going to hurt anyone," she said quietly. "I'm just a scientist." Ember lifted his small head and looked between Rose and the warriors. His yellow eyes showed confusion and distress. When Stone took a step forward, Ember spread his tiny wings protectively in front of Rose and made a warning chirp. "Impossible," muttered one of the warriors. "Dragons don't protect strangers." Stone studied the scene carefully. In all his years, he had never seen a dragon hatchling show such behavior. Ember was clearly defending the alien creature, treating it like family. But that violated everything the Parathi understood about dragon nature. "What magic is this?" Stone demanded. He gestured for his warriors to spread out and surround the area completely. Rose felt the tension rising. She needed to communicate somehow to show that she meant no harm. Slowly, she reached into her pack and pulled out her universal translator device. It was damaged like everything else, but maybe it still worked. The warriors tensed as she moved. Several of them breathed small jets of flame in warning, but Ember quickly placed himself between Rose and the flames, absorbing the heat with his own scales. The baby dragon's protective instincts were extraordinary. Rose activated the translator. It sparked and crackled, displaying error messages in multiple languages. Finally, it managed to produce halting, broken speech in the Parathi language. "Nope, harm, want," the device struggled to say. "Science, person, crash, here." Stone's eyes widened. The creature could speak even if poorly. This changed everything. He had been prepared to fight a beast or a demon, not an intelligent being. "You speak our tongue?" Stone asked. "Machine, speaks," Rose replied through the translator. "Learn your words. Study life. Weapons." She opened her pack wider and showed its contents. Medical supplies, data tablets, sample containers, and scientific instruments. Nothing that looked like weapons. Stone relaxed slightly, though he kept his guard up. Ember seemed to sense the decreasing tension. He climbed up Rose's arm and perched on her shoulder, chirping happily. The sound was unlike anything the warriors had heard before. Most dragon hatchlings made simple clicks or growls, but Ember's sounds were musical, almost like singing. The bond is real, Stone said slowly. He couldn't deny what he was seeing. But how is this possible? Before anyone could answer, more Parathi arrived. High Priestess Lyra descended gracefully, her golden scales catching sunlight that filtered through the leaves. Behind her came Elder Dawn, whose ancient face showed deep displeasure. What sorcery has corrupted our sacred ceremony? Dawn demanded. Her voice cracked with age and anger. This creature has stolen our hatchling's destiny. Lyra approached more carefully. As High Priestess, she had studied the ancient texts more thoroughly than anyone else. She had read stories of impossible things, but had always assumed they were myths. Tell me your name, Sky Wanderer, Lyra said. Her voice carried power, but also curiosity. Rose, the translator managed to convey. Dr. Rose Bennett. Rose, Lyra repeated, testing the strange sound. You have bonded with Ember. Do you understand what this means? Rose shook her head, then realized the gesture might not translate. No, understand. Bond meaning, she said through the device. Ember responded by pressing his small head against Rose's cheek. The warm, tingling sensation flowed through her again, stronger this time. For a brief moment, Rose felt emotions that weren't her own. Happiness, safety, belonging. These feelings came from Ember, shared somehow through their physical contact. Remarkable, Lyra whispered. The mental link has already formed. This is blasphemy, Dawn interrupted. Dragons bond only with Parathi, and only after proper ritual. This alien has corrupted our traditions with dark magic. No magic, Rose protested. Just meeting. Baby came to me. She tried to explain what had happened using simple words the translator could handle. The device crashed in the forest. She hid and watched the ceremony. Ember flew to her on his own. No spells or tricks were involved. Stone listened carefully. As a military leader, he was trained to assess threats and opportunities. This situation might be both. If the bond is genuine, he said slowly, then perhaps we should learn more about these humans. Before we make any decisions, learn, Dawn scoffed. We should destroy this corruption before it spreads. But Ember reacted to Dawn's hostile tone by pressing closer to Rose. His scales began to glow with a soft, silver-blue light. The glow was beautiful, but it was also something no one had ever seen before. Normal dragon scales only glowed during extreme emotion or combat. His coloring was already unusual, Lyra observed. Now this new ability manifests. Perhaps the spirits have chosen a different path for Ember. Rose felt the little dragon trembling against her. Whether from fear or excitement, she couldn't tell. Through their mysterious connection, she sensed his need for comfort. Instinctively, she began to hum a soft melody her mother had sung to her as a child. The effect was immediate. Ember's trembling stopped and his glow became steady and peaceful. The other Parathi stared in amazement. They had never seen a hatchling calm so quickly or respond to non-Parathi sounds. She soothed him with her voice. Stone noted. No magic required, just care. Dawn's expression grew even more sour. This proves nothing. The creature has merely confused a young mind with alien tricks. But Lyra was beginning to see something different. In all her years as High Priestess, she had performed hundreds of bonding ceremonies. Never had she witnessed such instant, powerful connection between two beings. The sacred flames had shown confusion about Ember's destiny, precisely because his true path lay with this strange visitor from the stars. We will return to the city, Lyra decided. All of us. Rose will come as our guest, not our prisoner. We must consult the ancient text before making any judgment. You cannot be serious, Dawn protested. I am High Priestess, Lyra replied firmly. My word is law in matters of spirit and ceremony. This bond exists whether we understand it or not. We must learn what it means, Stone nodded agreement. My warriors will provide escort, not capture. But, he looked directly at Rose, you will not attempt to leave until we have answers. Rose understood enough to know she was being invited rather than arrested. With Ember still perched on her shoulder, she stood up carefully. The baby dragon spread his small wings for balance, completely trusting her movements. As the group prepared to return to the Parathi city, none of them realized they were witnessing the beginning of the most important alliance in galactic history. The bond between one human and one dragon would soon change both species forever. Deep beneath the Parathi city, in chambers carved from volcanic rock thousands of years ago. High Priestess Lyra searched through scrolls that few had ever been allowed to see. Dust motes danced in the light of crystal formations that glowed with their own inner fire.
The silence was broken only by the soft rustle of ancient parchment and the distant rumble of the mountain's heart. Above,
in the guest quarters, Rose sat on a stone bench while Ember explored his new surroundings. The baby dragon had refused to leave her side, even when other Pirathi tried to coax him away with traditional dragon treats. His unusual silver-blue scales seemed to shimmer more brightly whenever he was near Rose, as if her presence somehow energized him. The universal translator had been repaired by Pirathi technicians who were fascinated by human engineering. Now Rose could communicate more easily, though the cultural concepts remained challenging to translate. "Why are your scales different from the others?" Rose asked Ember softly. She had learned that dragons could understand speech long before they could produce complex words themselves. Ember looked up at her with his bright yellow eyes and made a series of musical chirps. Through their growing mental link, Rose felt his response more than heard it. He had always been different. The other hatchlings avoided him. Even his own parents seemed unsure how to treat him. His strange coloring marked him as an outsider among his own people. Rose gently stroked his small head. "I know how that feels," she whispered. "I was always different too. Too curious, too eager to explore, too interested in aliens when everyone else feared them." The connection between them pulsed with shared understanding. Both were outcasts in their own ways, finding acceptance only in each other. In the archives below, Lyra finally found what she was looking for. Hidden among prophecies about weather patterns and harvest predictions was a text written in the oldest form of Pirathi script. She had to use magnifying crystals to read the faded words. "When the silver touched is born under the red sky," she read aloud, "and the sky wanderers arrive from distant stars. The bond of flame and mind shall bridge two worlds. The children of fire and the children of thought shall learn that strength comes not from conquest, but from understanding." Lyra's hands trembled as she continued reading. "The silver touched shall not follow the old paths, but will create new ones. Through harmony with the starborn, both peoples shall rise beyond their separate limitations." She had found references to sky wanderers before, but had always assumed they referred to other Pirathi settlements on distant mountains. Now she realized the prophecy spoke of something far more significant. It described visitors from other worlds entirely. Meanwhile, Captain Stone was conducting his own investigation. His warriors had examined Rose's crashed ship and brought back samples of human technology. The materials were lighter than Pirathi metals, but just as strong. The design principles were completely different from anything they had ever encountered. "Their approach to engineering is fascinating," reported Hal, his chief engineer. "Where we use brute force and heat resistance, they use precision and efficiency. Look at this power cell." He held up a small device from Rose's equipment. "It stores 3 times more energy than our best crystals, but weighs half as much." Stone studied the device carefully. "What does this tell us about their society?" "They think differently than we do," Hal replied. "We build things to last forever and overpower any obstacle. They build things to work perfectly with minimal resources. Both approaches have merit, but imagine what we could create if we combined them." Stone nodded thoughtfully. As a military leader, he understood the value of learning from one's enemies. But Rose didn't seem like an enemy. She had shown no aggression, carried no weapons, and seemed genuinely interested in peaceful contact. Back in the guest quarters, Elder Dawn arrived with several traditional Pirathi counselors. Her ancient face showed the same disapproval it had worn since the bonding ceremony. "This corruption must end," she announced. "The alien creature has bewitched our hatchling with unnatural influences. I demand that Ember be separated from it immediately and undergo purification rituals." Rose stood up quickly, and Ember responded by climbing onto her shoulder. The little dragon's scales began to glow with agitation. "Ember chooses to be here," Rose said firmly. "I'm not forcing him to stay with me." "A hatchling cannot make such choices," Dawn replied coldly. "Dragons follow their elders' wisdom until they reach maturity. This bond is preventing proper development." But as Dawn spoke, Ember did something that surprised everyone. He opened his small mouth and produced his first clear word. "No," the counselors gasped. Dragon hatchlings typically took months to learn speech. and their first words were usually food or mother. Ember had spoken a word of rejection, defending his choice to stay with Rose. Impossible, Dawn breathed. Hatchlings cannot develop language so quickly. Rose felt excitement pulse through their mental connection. Ember was proud of his achievement and eager to try more words. Good, friend, he managed to say, looking directly at Rose. Before Dawn could respond, High Priestess Lyra arrived with the ancient scroll. Her golden scales reflected the excitement in her eyes. I have found the answer, she announced. The prophecy of the silver-touched and the sky wanderers. She unrolled the scroll carefully and began to read the ancient words aloud. As the translation reached the gathered Pirathi, their expressions changed from skepticism to wonder. Even Dawn's hostility wavered as she heard the sacred words that had been written thousands of years before any of them were born. If this prophecy is true, Stone said slowly, then Rose's arrival was foretold long ago. The bond with Ember isn't corruption, it's destiny. Dawn struggled to maintain her opposition. Prophecies can be misinterpreted. Perhaps these sky wanderers refer to something else entirely. But Rose was beginning to understand something important. How many dragons like Ember have been born before? She asked. Lyra considered the question. Silver blue scales appear perhaps once in a generation. But those dragons have always struggled to find their place in our society. Most die young from loneliness or rejection. And how many times have aliens visited your world? Never, Lyra admitted. You are the first sky wanderer we have ever encountered. Rose looked down at Ember, who was listening intently to the conversation. Through their bond, she felt his growing understanding. He had been born different because he was meant for something different, not to fit into traditional Pirathi society, but to bridge the gap between two species. The prophecy says both peoples shall rise beyond their separate limitations, Rose quoted. What limitations do the Pirathi face? Stone and Lyra exchanged glances. It was a difficult question to answer in front of the elders. Our birth rates have been declining for generations, Stone finally admitted. Our technology has stagnated. We've become too focused on maintaining tradition and not enough on adapting to change. And humans? Lyra asked. What limitations do your people face? Rose thought carefully. We're curious and adaptable, but we're also alone in the galaxy. Every species we've encountered has been hostile or completely incompatible. We've started to wonder if we'll ever find true allies among the stars. Ember chirped softly and rubbed against Rose's cheek. Through their bond, she felt his simple but profound understanding. Two lonely species, two different kinds of outcasts, finding strength in each other. Dawn made one last attempt to reject the prophecy. Even if these words are true, we cannot simply abandon our ways for alien influences. But Lyra was already seeing the larger picture. The prophecy doesn't ask us to abandon our ways, she said thoughtfully. It asks us to grow beyond our limitations, to learn new possibilities. As if in response to her words, Ember's scales began to glow more brightly than ever before. The light was warm and inviting, filling the room with a sense of hope and possibility. For the first time in generations, the Pirathi were glimpsing a future that was different from their past. 3 days after the prophecy was revealed, Ember fell gravely ill. The little dragon, who had been energetic and playful, suddenly became listless and refused to eat. His silver-blue scales lost their shimmer and turned dull gray. Even his mental connection with Rose grew weak and flickering. High Priestess Lyra called for the best dragon healers in the city. They examined Ember carefully, checking his temperature, testing his reflexes, and analyzing samples of his breath. But their conclusion was troubling. This is separation sickness, announced Elder Thorn, the chief healer. His green-scaled hands glowed with diagnostic magic as he examined the patient. Young dragons sometimes suffer this condition when separated from their family bonds, but Ember has never been separated from anything. Perhaps the alien influence has confused his natural instincts, suggested another healer. Dragon hatchlings need specific spiritual connections to thrive. This human cannot provide what his development requires. Rose sat beside Ember's sleeping form, her heart heavy with worry. Through their fading bond, she could feel his distress, but she didn't understand what was wrong or how to help him. What exactly does separation sickness involve? She asked through the translator. Dragon physiology requires emotional and spiritual bonds to function properly, Thorn explained. Without proper connections, the body begins to shut down. The condition is usually fatal within a week. But Ember has a bond, Rose protested. He has me. You are not Parathi, Thorn replied bluntly. Your alien mind cannot provide what dragon development requires. The kindest thing would be to let nature take its course. Rose felt anger flash through her. You're giving up. Just like that? Captain Stone, who had been observing quietly, stepped forward. Our healers have centuries of experience, he said. If they cannot help Ember, then perhaps no one can. But Rose was already moving toward her salvaged equipment. As a xenobiologist, she had been trained to study alien physiology and biochemistry. Maybe Parathi medicine couldn't help Ember, but human science might offer different answers. I need to examine him myself, Rose announced, with my own instruments. Your primitive devices cannot match our magical healing, Thorn scoffed. Maybe not, Rose admitted. But they might show us something your magic misses. She activated her bioscanner and began running detailed analyses of Ember's condition. The device was designed to work on unknown alien species, adapting its sensors to detect whatever biological processes it encountered. The results were fascinating and alarming. Ember's metabolic rate had dropped by 60%. His brain activity showed unusual patterns, almost like he was dreaming constantly. Most importantly, his body chemistry was severely unbalanced. His mineral levels are completely wrong, Rose announced after an hour of analysis. Look at these readings. His calcium is too low, his iron is nearly depleted, and he's missing several trace elements entirely. Impossible, Thorn protested. We feed all hatchlings the same balanced diet. They receive everything they need for growth. Not everything, Rose said, studying the data more carefully. Ember's scales contain metallic compounds that normal dragons don't have. His silver-blue coloring comes from titanium and cobalt deposits in his scale structure. But your traditional diet doesn't include those minerals. She turned to address the gathered healers. Where do adult dragons with unusual scale colors get their minerals? From the deep volcanic vents, admitted Hal, the engineer who had been listening to the discussion. The rarest scale colors appear only in dragons who work in the deepest parts of our mountain forges, where exotic minerals are abundant. But hatchlings never go to those depths, Lyra pointed out. The environment is too dangerous. Rose's mind raced through the possibilities. What if we could bring those minerals to Ember instead of taking him to them? How? Stone asked. Rose examined her equipment again. Her crashed ship had contained mineral processing tools for analyzing planetary samples. Most were destroyed, but she might be able to jury-rig something useful. I need access to your volcanic vents, she said, and permission to modify some of your mining equipment. The Parathi looked skeptical. Their technology was based on magical principles they had refined over thousands of years. Human science seemed crude and primitive by comparison. Your science cannot improve upon our methods, Thorn insisted. Maybe not improve, Rose agreed, but supplement them. Your magic works with natural forces. My science works with atomic structures, different approaches, but they might complement each other. Ember stirred weakly and made a soft sound that might have been an attempt at her name. The little dragon's distress motivated Rose to push harder. Please, she said simply, let me try. If I fail, you've lost nothing. If I succeed, you might learn something new. Captain Stone made the decision. Show us what human science can do. The next 12 hours tested Rose's knowledge and creativity to their limits. Working in the mountain's mineral processing chambers, she combined her scanning equipment with Parathi extraction tools. The magical systems that pulled pure elements from raw ore could be guided by her instruments to isolate the specific compounds Ember needed. The Parathi engineers watched in fascination as Rose worked. Her approach was completely different from theirs. Where they relied on traditional techniques passed down through generations, she experimented and adapted constantly. When one method failed, she immediately tried another. She doesn't follow patterns, Hal observed to Stone. Each problem gets a unique solution. Is that good or bad? Stone asked. Different, Hal replied thoughtfully. We perfect one way of doing things and use it forever. She invents new ways for each situation. By dawn, Rose had created a mineral supplement specifically tailored to Ember's unusual physiology. The mixture contained titanium compounds, cobalt extracts, and a dozen other elements that her scans had identified as missing from his system. But giving the supplement to a sick dragon hatchling required delicate work. Too much could poison him. Too little might not help. Rose had to calculate dosages based on his weight, metabolism, and absorption rates. The Pirathi healers watched nervously as she administered the treatment. Their magic could heal injuries and fight diseases. But this was different. This was using chemistry to correct a biological imbalance that their healing traditions didn't recognize. Within an hour, Ember's scales began to regain their shimmer. His breathing became stronger and more regular. Most importantly, his mental connection with Rose brightened like a flame being fed fresh air. Remarkable, Thorne admitted grudgingly. The humans' primitive methods have succeeded where our healing failed. But Rose knew the real success was bigger than just saving Ember's life. She had demonstrated something that could change how both species approached problems. Human adaptability and scientific method, combined with Pirathi magical understanding and traditional wisdom, created possibilities that neither could achieve alone. Ember opened his eyes and looked directly at Rose. "Better," he said clearly. His vocabulary was growing daily, accelerated by their unique bond. Word of the successful treatment spread quickly through the Pirathi city. The young dragons began approaching Rose with curiosity instead of fear. They had never seen an adult of any species solve problems the way she did, using questions and experiments instead of relying on established knowledge. "How did you know what to try?" asked a young Pirathi named Iris. Her orange scales marked her as a student healer. "I didn't know," Rose admitted. "I guessed, tested, and adjusted based on what I learned. Science isn't about knowing everything. It's about figuring out what you don't know and finding ways to learn it." The concept was revolutionary to the Pirathi, who had always valued accumulated wisdom over experimental discovery. But Rose's success with Ember proved that both approaches had value. That evening, as Ember played happily with other young dragons for the first time in his life, High Priestess Lyra approached Rose with a thoughtful expression. "You have shown us something important," Lyra said. "We thought the prophecy meant we should learn to live with sky wanderers, but perhaps it means we should learn to think like them." Rose watched Ember demonstrate his improved health by performing aerial loops that made the other hatchlings chirp with delight. "Maybe it means both species should learn from each other," she suggested. "Your wisdom and our curiosity, your magic and our science, your traditions and our adaptability." The idea was beginning to take root in Pirathi society. Change was coming, whether the elders liked it or not. 2 weeks had passed since Ember's recovery, and the Pirathi city buzzed with unprecedented change. Young dragons who had never questioned their traditions now asked endless questions about everything from mining techniques to meal preparation. Their curiosity had been awakened by watching Rose's scientific approach to problem-solving. Captain Stone found himself in an unexpected position as he walked through the city's central market. Instead of maintaining order and discipline, he was fielding requests from citizens who wanted to understand more about the humans and their methods. "Captain," called out Vera, a middle-aged Pirathi who managed the crystal farms. "This human science, could it help us grow larger crystals? Our energy production has been declining for decades." Stone had been thinking about similar issues himself. As military commander, he was responsible for the city's defense. But what good were strong walls if the civilization inside them was slowly dying? "I think we need to have an honest conversation," he told Vera. "Not just about crystals, but about our future." That evening, Stone requested a private meeting with High Priestess Lyra. They met in her chambers, high in the mountain where the air was thin and the view stretched for miles across the volcanic landscape. "Our people are changing," Stone began. "Rose's influence is spreading faster than I expected." Lyra nodded. "I've seen it too. The young ones especially. They're starting to think differently about everything." "Is that dangerous?" Stone asked. Lyra was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. "Perhaps dangerous to our old ways," she said finally. "But our old ways were already failing us." She moved to a window carved into the rock and gazed out at the city below. "Stone, we need to discuss something that the Council has avoided mentioning. Our population decline isn't just about birth rates, it's about hope." Stone joined her at the window. "What do you mean?" "Our young people see no future worth building," Lyra explained. "We do the same things our ancestors did in the same ways for the same reasons. There's no growth, no discovery, no excitement about what tomorrow might bring. Why would anyone want to bring children into such a world?" The truth was painful but undeniable. Pirathi society had become so focused on preserving tradition that it had stopped creating new possibilities. But now we have Rose, Stone observed, and Ember, and suddenly everyone is asking questions again. Exactly. For the first time in generations, our people are imagining different futures. The question is, what do we do about it? Before Stone could answer, a commotion erupted in the courtyard below. They looked down to see a crowd gathering around what appeared to be some kind of demonstration. In the center of the crowd, Rose was working with a group of young Pirathi engineers. They had combined human and Pirathi technology to create something entirely new, a crystal matrix that could store energy more efficiently than anything either species had developed alone. "Watch this," Rose was saying to the fascinated crowd. She activated the device and it began glowing with a steady bright light that was clearly more powerful than traditional Pirathi crystals. "How does it work?" asked Hal, the chief engineer. "Your magical focusing techniques combined with my precision manufacturing," Rose explained. "The crystal structure channels energy the way your magic does, but the atomic level modifications allow it to store much more power in the same space." Ember, now fully recovered and growing rapidly, perched on Rose's shoulder and added his own commentary. His vocabulary had exploded in recent weeks, and he seemed to understand both human and Pirathi concepts equally well. "New ways better than old ways," Ember declared, "but old ways still good too. Mixed together make stronger." The young dragon's simple wisdom captured something profound. Progress didn't require abandoning everything from the past. It meant taking the best of old knowledge and combining it with new possibilities. Elder Dawn appeared at the edge of the crowd, her ancient face twisted with disapproval. "This corruption spreads like disease," she announced loudly. "Our sacred traditions are being abandoned for alien tricks." But her words fell flat. The crowd was too excited by the new possibilities to care about her warnings. They had seen proof that change could lead to improvement, not destruction. "Elder Dawn," Rose said respectfully, "I'm not trying to replace your traditions. I'm trying to learn from them and add human knowledge to make them even better." "You understand nothing," Dawn snapped. "These traditions have kept our people alive for thousands of years. Your improvements will destroy everything we are. What if they save everything you could become?" Rose replied gently. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Dawn had no answer that didn't sound like fear of the unknown. Captain Stone made a decision that would change history. He stepped forward and addressed the crowd. "Citizens of the Mountain City," he announced in his commanding voice. "High Priestess Lyra and I have been discussing our future. We believe it's time to make an official proposal." The crowd fell silent, sensing the importance of the moment. "We propose establishing a formal alliance with the humans," Stone continued. "Not just friendship with Rose, but a permanent partnership between our species. We would share knowledge, technology, and resources to help both civilizations grow stronger." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Such a concept was unprecedented in Pirathi history. "This is madness," Dawn protested. "We know nothing about these humans except for one individual. How can we trust an entire species based on such limited contact?" Stone had expected this objection. "Rose, tell us about your people. What are they like?" Rose thought carefully about how to represent humanity fairly. "We're explorers and scientists mostly," she said. "We're curious about everything, sometimes to a fault. We make mistakes often, but we learn from them quickly. We believe that life is better when different people work together instead of fighting. And if we contacted your people, how would they respond to an alliance proposal?" "They would be thrilled," Rose answered honestly. "Humans have been searching for friendly alien contact for centuries. Finding a species willing to share knowledge and cooperate peacefully would be our greatest dream come true." Ember chirped agreement and added, "Human people, good like Rose, want to help, want to learn, not want to hurt or control." The little dragon's endorsement carried unexpected weight. As the prophesied silver-touched dragon, his opinions had begun to hold special significance among the Pirathi. High Priestess Lyra stepped forward to support Stone's proposal. The ancient prophecy spoke of both peoples rising beyond their separate limitations, she reminded the crowd. Perhaps this alliance is how that prophecy is meant to be fulfilled. The debate continued for hours as more citizens joined the discussion. Some supported the alliance idea enthusiastically. Others worried about losing their cultural identity. A few sided with Elder Dawn in opposing any change. but the momentum was clearly building toward acceptance. The young Parathi especially saw the alliance as an opportunity for adventure and discovery that their lives had been missing. Finally, Stone called for a formal vote. All who support establishing contact with the human species and exploring an alliance agreement, signify your consent. The result was overwhelming. Nearly 70% of the citizens voted in favor of the proposal. Dawn's face turned dark with fury. This decision will doom us all, she declared. But if the people choose corruption over tradition, then tradition must find other ways to survive. She stalked away from the gathering, and several of the oldest Parathi followed her. Stone made a mental note to keep watch on their activities. As the crowd dispersed, Rose found herself surrounded by excited young Parathi asking questions about human technology, culture, and history. For the first time since her crash landing, she truly felt like she might be going home soon. But home would be different now. She wouldn't be returning as a failed explorer who had found nothing but empty worlds. She would be coming back as humanity's first alien ambassador, bearing news of a species that wanted to be friends. Ember sensed her excitement through their bond and spread his small wings happily. Going to meet more humans soon? He asked. Yes, Rose said, stroking his silver blue scales. Would you like that? Want to see human home? Ember replied. Want to help both peoples be friends? The little dragon who had changed everything was ready to help write the next chapter of galactic history. Elder Dawn's final act of defiance came at dawn, 3 days before the scheduled transmission to human space. She had gathered the most conservative Parathi elders and issued a formal challenge that no one could ignore. By the ancient laws of trial and judgment, Dawn announced from the steps of the Great Hall, I invoke the trial by fire. Let the alien prove her worth through our most sacred test, or be banished forever as unfit to corrupt our people. High Priestess Lyra emerged from the hall, her golden scales reflecting the early morning light. Behind her came Captain Stone and a growing crowd of curious citizens. At the back of the group, Rose walked quietly with Ember perched on her shoulder. The trial by fire has not been invoked for 3 centuries, Lyra said carefully. Are you certain this is the path you choose, Elder Dawn? I am certain that our traditions demand it, Dawn replied stubbornly. If this human wishes to influence our future, let her prove she understands our values. Let her face the flames of truth and emerge pure, or let her burn away like the corruption she represents. Rose stepped forward, even though she didn't fully understand what was being discussed. What exactly is the trial by fire? She asked through her translator. Captain Stone explained with obvious reluctance. It's an ancient test where candidates must enter the sacred cavern and survive 3 challenges. The cavern contains our most dangerous volcanic vents, where temperatures reach levels that would kill most living things. Traditionally, only the strongest Parathi warriors have attempted it, and many have died. And if I refuse? Rose asked. Then Dawn's faction will claim you are too weak to be trusted, Lyra replied. They will use your refusal to turn more citizens against the Alliance. Rose looked at Ember, who had been listening intently to every word. Through their bond, she felt his concern and determination. The little dragon understood the stakes better than anyone. If Rose goes, I go too, Ember declared. His voice was clearer and stronger than it had been weeks ago. We are bonded. We face challenges together. Hatchlings cannot enter the sacred cavern, Dawn protested. The trial is for individuals, not pairs. But Lyra was studying the ancient law scrolls that governed the trial. Actually, she said slowly, the laws speak of the candidate and their spiritual guide. For Parathi, that usually means their ancestor spirits. But Ember could qualify as Rose's spiritual guide under the old wording. Dawn's eyes flashed with anger. She had expected to trap Rose in an impossible situation, not create a loophole that might actually help the human succeed. Very well, Dawn said through gritted teeth. Let them both face the flames. When they fail, no one can claim we didn't give them a fair chance. 2 hours later, Rose and Ember stood at the entrance to the sacred cavern. The opening was a natural formation that led deep into the mountain's volcanic core. Heat waves shimmered in the air, and the smell of sulfur was almost overwhelming. The 3 challenges are traditional, Lyra explained. First, you must reach the chamber of reflecting flames without being burned. Second, you must demonstrate your understanding of Parathi values in the presence of the truth fire. Third, You must prove your commitment to our people's welfare by making a significant sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Rose asked nervously. "That depends on what the flames reveal," Lyra replied. "The trial will show you what it requires." Rose checked her equipment one final time. Her heat-resistant suit was designed for extreme environments, but the sacred cavern would test its limits. More importantly, she had to protect Ember from temperatures that could kill him instantly. "Ready?" she asked the little dragon. Ember's scales glowed with determination. "Ready," he replied. "We do this together." They entered the cavern as hundreds of Pirathi watched from a safe distance. The first challenge began immediately. The tunnel sloped downward into increasing heat and pressure. Traditional candidates would rely on their natural fire resistance and magical protection. Rose had to depend on human technology and ingenuity. As they descended, Rose noticed something interesting about the cavern's structure. The volcanic vents weren't random. They followed patterns that suggested intelligent design or at least natural optimization for airflow and heat distribution. "Ember," she said softly, "do you sense anything unusual about these tunnels?" The little dragon tilted his head and concentrated. His enhanced senses, sharpened by their bond, picked up details that normal perception would miss. "Old magic," he said finally. "Very old. Not just for testing, for learning." Rose began to understand. The sacred cavern wasn't just a trial ground. It was a teaching environment created by ancient Pirathi to help their people understand volcanic forces and thermal management. The challenges weren't meant to be survived through brute force but solved through understanding. Instead of fighting the heat, Rose began working with it. She used her scientific knowledge to find the coolest air currents and most stable temperatures. When Ember began to overheat, she guided him to spots where the airflow provided natural cooling. They reached the chamber of reflecting flames faster than anyone had expected. The second challenge waited in a circular room where flame jets created complex patterns on the walls. According to tradition, candidates had to interpret these patterns to demonstrate their understanding of Pirathi values. Rose studied the flames carefully. To most observers, they would seem chaotic and random, but her scientific training helped her recognize the underlying patterns. The flames told a story about balance, cooperation, and the importance of adapting to natural forces rather than fighting them. "The flames speak of harmony," Rose announced. "They show that strength comes not from conquering nature, but from understanding it and working with it. The greatest Pirathi achievements came when your people learned to channel volcanic energy rather than simply enduring it." Outside the cavern, Elder Dawn listened to Rose's interpretation with growing dismay. The human was succeeding where Dawn had expected her to fail. The third challenge appeared as they moved deeper into the mountain. In the final chamber, a massive volcanic vent dominated the center of the room. The heat was so intense that even Ember's natural fire resistance was being overwhelmed. "What sacrifice does the trial require?" Rose asked aloud. The answer came through her bond with Ember. The little dragon understood something that Rose hadn't yet realized. The greatest sacrifice she could make wasn't giving up something she valued. It was giving up the safety of remaining separate from Pirathi society. "The sacrifice," Ember said with sudden clarity, "is fear." Rose understood immediately. The trial wasn't asking her to give up anything material. It was asking her to give up the fear of truly committing to a relationship between species, to stop being just a visitor and become a genuine bridge between two worlds. Standing beside the massive volcanic vent, Rose made a declaration that surprised everyone, including herself. "I'm not just proposing an alliance," she announced. "I'm proposing to stay here permanently as the first human ambassador to the Pirathi. Ember and I will help both species learn from each other, but we'll make our home here as part of your community." The commitment was real and absolute. Rose was offering to give up her own species' familiar environment to help build something entirely new. Ember responded by spreading his wings and flying directly over the volcanic vent. His silver-blue scales absorbed the intense heat and began glowing with a new kind of light. Instead of the harsh orange-red of normal fire, Ember's flames became a cool, brilliant blue-white that seemed to calm the violent volcanic forces. The entire sacred cavern responded to Ember's new ability. The chaotic flame jets organized themselves into beautiful, symmetrical patterns. The dangerous heat became warm and welcoming. The trial ground transformed into something that felt more like a celebration than a test. Rose and Ember emerged from the cavern to find the entire Pirathi population waiting for them. Even Elder Dawn stood speechless as she witnessed Ember's transformed abilities and Rose's demonstrated commitment. "The trial is complete," High Priestess Lyra announced. "The sacred flames have accepted both the human and the silver-touched dragon. Let no one question their place among us." That evening, Rose activated her repaired communication equipment and sent a message toward human space. But instead of calling for rescue, she sent an invitation. "This is Dr. Rose Bennett, calling any human vessels in range," she transmitted. "I have made contact with a friendly alien species called the Pirathi. They are interested in establishing peaceful relations and sharing knowledge with humanity. I am sending coordinates for diplomatic contact. Please come prepared for the most important first contact event in human history." 6 months later, the first human diplomatic ship arrived at Dracoris to find something unprecedented. A thriving joint community, where humans and Pirathi lived and worked together. New Haven, as it came to be called, represented everything both species had dreamed of finding among the stars. Ember, now fully grown but still uniquely colored, served as the first official ambassador between species. His ability to understand both human and Pirathi thinking made him invaluable in bridging cultural gaps and preventing misunderstandings. Rose had kept her promise to remain on Dracoris, but she was no longer alone. The community that grew around her and Ember attracted scientists, artists, engineers, and explorers from both species. Together, they created technologies and discoveries that neither species could have achieved alone. Elder Dawn eventually came to accept the changes, though she never stopped grumbling about abandoning tradition. But even she had to admit that the young Pirathi seemed happier and more energetic than they had been in generations. The alliance between humans and Pirathi became the foundation for a larger galactic community. Other species, seeing the success of peaceful cooperation, began reaching out to join the growing network of friends among the stars. And it all began with one small dragon who saw a lonely human and decided that friendship was more important than following ancient rules. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't conquering the galaxy, but simply being brave enough to trust someone different from yourself. In the end, humanity's greatest achievement wasn't superior technology or military might. It was the simple ability to make friends across the vast darkness of space, proving that understanding and cooperation could overcome any barrier that the universe might place between thinking beings.